contributed significantly, not just to CAC, but also forensic science in general, and give them a forum to talk about what they've done or where they've been or what they see in the future and things like that. So we've had a marvelous variety of topics and presentations, from extremely serious to somewhat lighthearted, and it's been my privilege to work with these people in the past. It's especially my privilege today to be able to introduce our speaker, Lucian Haag, who has been a CAC member for a long time, even though he doesn't reside in the Golden State. But he is who I consider to be the preeminent expert in firearm, especially reconstructions. And so I'm very much looking forward to Luke's presentation this afternoon. Please help me welcome Mr. Lucian Haag.
Thank you, old friend. Just a moment. Normally, I, of course, have slides, and they're entertaining. This is the most difficult presentation one can give, at least that I can give, because there are no slides. So I have to look at some notes to get it right and get it the way I want to hear it. Let me start by saying I'm not one of the founders of the CAC, but I did find the CMC many years ago when I was a student in a 2-semester criminalistics course at Cal State Long Beach, not far from here. It was about 63 or 64. And my association with the CAC has been a memorable and wonderful relationship for the many years that have followed. The end of next month, I will have been employed as a criminalist for 46 years. Doesn't seem possible. And a CAC member for 39 years. By the middle of the following month, I will be 71 years of age. I thought a bit of autobiographical information might be of interest, not out of some exaggerated sense of self-importance, because I know that I must seem a little odd and out of step to many of you that have some familiarity with me, my constant and seeming all-consuming interest in firearms, and most anything having to do with firearms. That may have always troubled some CAC members or made them a little uneasy. About 10 years ago, I offered something of an explanation in the fall 2000 fourth quarter CAC News. Although some of my childhood photographs included in that article may have only increased some readers' concerns. I hope you've all noticed that back issues of the CAC News have been archived and are accessible on our website and go back as far as October of '71. As for me, I'm a dinosaur. And like the dinosaurs, a species that is destined for extinction. But before my kind is gone, I'd like you to know how it once was, and how I came to be the way I am. I was born in Springfield, Illinois in July of 1940, and grew up in a small community called Southern View on the south side of Springfield. Everyone there knew everyone. On summer evenings, parents sat out in lawn chairs in their front yards. The men shared a beer or two, talked about the recent war, the weather, cussed the government, while the women talked about whatever, and we kids chased and captured lightning bugs in jars. At the end of October, my friends and I went trick-or-treating without any parental supervision or accompaniment. It simply wasn't necessary in those wonderful times. In winter, we hitched rides with our sleds on the back of cars as they came to a stop on snow-covered streets at one of the local four-way stop intersections. There were no traffic lights in Southern View. None of you here today will ever know or experience these things because of today's child predators, possible poison candy, new laws, regulations, claims, and possible charges of child abuse or child endangerment for some of the things our parents did or allowed us to do. Our parents were patriotic, conservative Midwesterners that had a strong belief in personal responsibility. Mine were strict when they needed to be. I got spanked when I deserved it. My father's assurances of punitive measures for postulated bad behavior were not idle ones and were taken seriously. At the same time, my father would take me hunting, fishing, and spelunking, depending on the time of year, the latter activity taking place in caves in eastern Missouri and northern Arkansas. Whether successful or not, the hunting and fishing trips would usually culminate in some form of target shooting with a BB gun and later a .22 rifle. I came to enjoy the personal challenge of marksmanship, starting with my Red Ryder lever-action BB gun, which I still have, and my interest in recreational shooting has continued to this day. How Gene Shepard, the author of A Christmas Story, found out about my childhood, I will never know. But I am, and I was, the little boy in that story, to include a confrontation and fight with Southern View's version of Scott Farkas. I also experienced the taste of Lifebuoy soap for unacceptable language on more than one occasion, and I even broke a lens in my glasses with a BB that rebounded from a beam in Uncle Vic's barn on my very first attempt to rid it of starlings in the lawn. For a boy approaching adolescence in the late 1940s and early 1950s, to be given a 20-gauge shotgun and a single-shot .22 rifle was a part of the rite of passage. It was also a strong statement of responsibility for my father. I was being entrusted with two firearms that could put some food on the table, or if misused, kill me or one of my friends. But I think it was the mystery associated with the discharge of firearms and my gradually developing scientific bent that intrigued me the most. Events occurred with firearms faster than the eye could follow. Ignition, the launch of the projectile, and a seemingly instantaneous effect of the bullet many yards downrange. I didn't know it then, but my forensic career started the day I straddled a railroad track behind my house on 3rd Street and ricocheted a full 50-round box of .22 rimfire bullets off of that steel rail. I searched and searched for one of those bullets without any success, although I had a good idea of what they would look like from the oval gray deposits of lead on the rail and the wonderful sound they made as they departed and soon struck the ground at a distance I would estimate to be 50 or 100 yards downrange. In recent years, I've returned to the village of Southern View several times, Springfield's version of Mayberry. These visits have a Twilight Zone quality about them. The trees have grown taller, the houses have become smaller, and the distances between them shorter. The apple orchard next to the Southern View Elementary School has been replaced with a dollar store. Eddie Jansen's family market across the street is no more, nor is Pat Barber's shop next door to Jansen's, where my childhood haircuts cost 50 cents. At least some of the fields and hedgerows that I hunted are still there, viewed from a distance, but upon closer inspection they are no longer accessible, having no trespassing and no hunting signs every 100 feet or so. By the time I was in high school, my father's work had taken us to Southern California, in the small town of Linwood, just a few miles north of where we are today. While others are going to football games, dances, surfing, or hanging out at one or more of the local drive-ins in pinstripe and flame job cars, customized by Barris right there in Linwood, my small circle of shooting buddies and I were off to the desert most every weekend. The high school had a rifle team that I had joined. I became an avid handloader of ammunition for a growing collection of firearms. This is an endeavor that has strong scientific underpinnings and provided continued opportunities for experimentation, many of which would later become applicable to forensic questions involving firearms and shooting scene reconstruction. The weekends at various remote campsites in the Mojave Desert to the northeast of Lucerne Valley were more than just opportunities to go shooting. They also involved some basic experimentation in exterior and terminal ballistics. A few years ago, on a drive from Carefree, Arizona to Bakersfield, I tried to get out to one of my favorite campsites, only to find it closed to public entry for the protection of some desert lizard or rat. Another closure on a past life that was so memorable and formative. However, just to reassure you that I wasn't quite so unidimensional as this description might suggest, I was in the Linwood High School band where I saw the girl that I knew I wanted to marry. She is here today, just as beautiful as I remember her. Her name at the time was Sandy Svensson. That's Svensson with a D. Sandy, would you and my two wonderful sons stand up? Sandy was the girl next door, in that we lived on the same street, and she would walk by my house on her way home from school nearly every day. Her father was an accomplished marksman and commercial photographer with the nickname of Trig, short for Trigger. So you can well imagine we got along quite well. Among other things, he was a commercial photographer for Roy Weatherby of the famous Weatherby Firearms Company, then located in nearby Southgate, California. But before I convinced Sandy to marry me, I went away to Cal Berkeley for a few years to get a degree in chemistry, convinced she would be smitten by some handsome jock on the football team or accomplished musician. That didn't happen, and I'm still not sure why, but I had been so much the better for it, and our marriage of 47 years. It's probably hard for most of you to believe, but even Cal Berkeley had a rifle team in 1961. Check it out. But my studies and other activities kept me too busy to participate. I was able to keep one of my high-powered rifles at the residence hall, a 6.5 by 55 millimeter Mauser equipped with an awesome telescopic sight in the off chance that I might go hunting with a friend in the mountains of Northern California. This rifle and its hand-loaded ammunition were kept in the house mother's residence at Bowles Hall. Now it's probably a felony to be within a certain distance of any school with a firearm, and even taking a cased one out of the trunk of my car at that residence hall today would probably result in a response from the SWAT team. Unlike a number of the CAC's founders, I didn't know of Paul Kirk and his program when I was graduated from Cal in 1963. My degree was simply in chemistry. I wouldn't discover criminalistics and find the CAC until the fall of that year. This was when I went to Cal State at Long Beach with the idea of becoming a teacher. One of my former shooting buddies, now a Linwood police officer, urged me to take Dwayne Wolfer's criminalistics course. This I did, and this was followed by the second semester course. During this time, Dwayne invited me to attend a CAC meeting, somewhere here in the area, I think Long Beach or Newport Beach, and even give a paper, which I did, a presentation on the separation of dyes and ballpoint pen inks by paper chromatography. What's that? At this meeting, and possibly a subsequent CAC meeting, I met Jack Cadman, Tony Longhetti, Larry Regal, Marty Klein, Jim Brackett, and other senior members of the CAC. Their presentations and personal encouragement were inspirational. Dwayne also invited me down to the LAPD crime lab where I met Ray Pinker and had a chance to see what criminalistics was all about. I was hooked. All that remained was, where could I find a job in a crime lab? I had taken and passed the written test for positions at the LAPD, the LA County Sheriff's Lab, and the Ventura Lab, when Dwayne once again entered my future when he told me about an opening at a one-man lab in Phoenix, Arizona. I took and passed the various tests for the city of Phoenix and started there as an entry-level criminalist in June of '65. That laboratory grew exponentially in the years to come, as did Phoenix. By 1973, I became the supervising criminalist with a number of criminalists under me. I had worked in all sections of the laboratory, but the firearms section was my favorite for obvious reasons. This was the age of the generalist, another species that is probably destined for extinction. The city of Phoenix was very supportive of professional advancement, and I had joined the CAC, AFTI, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences by this time, and had attended a number of meetings held by these organizations. These meetings broadened my contacts with other criminals such as John Thornton, John DeHaan, Jan Wyszynski, Faye Springer, Jim White, Ed Rhodes, Al Biasotti, John Davis, David Berg, Jerry Chisholm, Chuck Morton, and Peter Barnett, to name a very memorable few. I started writing and presenting in the early 1970s. This arose out of a desire to do so, and what I felt then, and still believe today, is an obligation of every criminalist. I left the City of Phoenix lab in March of '82 and entered full-time consulting. Today I'm gradually entering some form of retirement. This involves less and less casework, and the opportunity to engage in more experimentation and writing. I can only hope that when I depart this life, it will be with remaining projects and experiments to do and things yet to be written. These I will leave to some of you. Some closing thoughts. Court appearances and testimony are often the end result of our work and can be the most daunting and stressful aspect of it. One of the actors in this arena is a facilitator, there to elicit your findings that are favorable to his or her position. The other actor is your detractor, your cross-examiner. This person's role may simply be to point out the limitations of your findings and those relevant matters in the case that you could not answer. But it may also extend to personal attacks, suggestions of bias, intellectual dishonesty, and or unethical conduct. You should realize that there are often as many as 3 to 4 truthful answers to certain questions put to you in court. How would you answer this question from your cross-examiner? Isn't it true that you are an advocate? Yes or no could both be truthful answers, but the question is ambiguous, so an alternative, still truthful answer might be, in what way do you mean? Or, an advocate for what or whom? But asking a question as an expert witness sitting on the witness stand may precipitate an admonition from the judge to simply answer the question. My answer to this question posed to me many years ago was, yes, absolutely, but not in the way your question would seem to suggest. This prompt and affirmative response accomplishes at least 2 things. 1, it exposes the ambiguity in the question and either forces the cross-examiner to allow you to explain and remain in control, or 2, it forces him to drop it immediately, realizing he or she has been bested, and it will allow the attorney who has called you to the witness stand to have you later explain your answer. One additional comment on this courtroom exchange. A seemingly similar answer, yes, absolutely, but not in the way you mean, will probably get you in trouble, in that it puts you in the role of a mind reader. My point here is that the words and how we use them are absolutely critical in our role as criminalists and expert witnesses. You must devote time to choosing just the right words for a report and anticipated cross-examination questions in trials and depositions. Transcripts of poorly worded testimony and badly written reports seldom go away. John Murdoch once commented in a telephone conversation we had, "I've never lost a case. And after a short pause, I've also never won a case." I immediately understood and have never forgotten this wise and thoughtful statement, nor should you. Don't take a jury's decision as an affirmation of your work or the correctness of your findings when the jury rules in favor of the side that called you to the witness stand. If the jury appears to understand what you did, how you did it, and what you found, this should be the test and your only concern as a forensic scientist. So whom do you work? Who pays your salary or your fees? The answers to these 2 questions is not, or at least should not, be the same. In a profession, I would hope that you work for yourself. Someone else, a government agency, a private institute, a law firm, pays for your efforts. Being a teacher and a student. To be a good criminalist, you must also be a good teacher. The qualities of a good witness at trial are also those of a good teacher. Your class is the jury. The preparation and presentation of papers at professional meetings is an important aspect in developing communication skills from the witness stand. I would even view it as an obligation to the profession. There's also the complementary matter of being a good student. You should come away from every trial, every deposition, every interview, and certainly every CAC meeting with something special, something new to remember or consider in your future work and testimony. Bob Blackovich's paper of yesterday on magnetic levitation was an excellent example. In this new age of specialization, CAC and other professional meetings give you the chance to gain a better understanding of what occurs in other areas of criminalistics and the sorts of analytical questions they can answer. Such knowledge is absolutely essential to being a competent criminalist. From a broader long-term viewpoint, one can never be sure where a teacher's influence will lead or end, but the objective should be clear. It is to see that future day or time when the student teaches the teacher. This is as it should be. It's how we advance. The future. I think about the future, not mine, for I'm in the autumn of my life, but I think of yours. And I regret to say that the future of our country and our profession appears dark to me. I hope I'm wrong, but if I am not, I sincerely hope that you can do something about it. I submit that you not only have an obligation to constantly learn, to be a teacher, but to also speak up and be heard in one way or another on proposed legislation that stands to affect our profession, as well as the public and the justice system. Please note that I did not restrict this statement to the criminal justice system. There are also civil actions that have scientific issues and consequences for our profession, the Daubert case being the most notable example. As experienced criminalists, we know more about the merits and limitations of instrumentation, analytical methods, and protocols than any legislator, any panel of academicians who have never worked in a crime lab or gone to a crime scene, any attorney general, police chief, or any sheriff. The latter group will invariably cave to political and other pressures when it comes to new legislation build or advertised to reduce crime, save lives, or improve crime laboratories' ability to detect crime. I also regret that you will probably never know how it once was. To receive a case with new issues and one or more types of evidence for which there was no established and validated method of analysis. We had to think out an analytical strategy, perhaps do some empirical testing before we tackled the actual evidence. It was exciting. After 45 years, I'm still enamored by the notion of how science can aid the courts in the pursuit of justice. One of the most memorable papers I can think of was given by John Haag 20-some years ago. It was a firearms paper. We think about John as the dean of bombs and arson and fires. It was one of the best and well-thought-out firearms papers I had seen or have ever seen. My only regret is he hasn't published it. In those times long before ASCLD lab accreditation and now ISO whatever, we used our intellects to design and conduct our analysis. We noted what we did and would ultimately explain and defend our analysis in court. In my view, the jury is still out as to whether there have been more benefits than detriments as a result of accreditation. I wish that every one of you could see the things that I have seen and have met the various founders of this organization from so many, many years ago. In my mind, I can still hear their voices and see them at the podium at some long past CAC meeting. Some closing thoughts and advice. Money should be the fringe benefit of working in a field or profession you enjoy. As long as you have a functioning mind, you should continue to learn from your experiences, your observations, and the work of others. Find out what others in the field are doing and how it might relate to your own area of special interest. Learn as if you were to live forever. Read anything and everything written by John Thornton, John Murdoch, Ron Nichols, Peter DeForest, Keith Inman, and Nora Rubin. They are some of the CAC's finest thinkers and writers. Review the many ethical dilemmas written by Pete Barnett and the late Parker Bell. These were published in the CAC News in the early 1980s. They are very worthwhile, and I would hope that they could all be available in a single place on our website. Better still, you should consider Pete's book. Looks like this: Ethics in Forensic Science, Professional Standards for the Practice of Criminalistics, published in 2001 by the CRC Press. Follow Ed Blake's advice given some years ago at a CAC banquet, which I hastily wrote down on a paper napkin. If in your analysis you do not consider reasonable alternative explanations for an event, what you're doing is not science. Digest and adopt John Thornton's advice regarding evidence given many years ago during a CAC ethics discussion or investigation. John said, "It's not your evidence or my evidence, but the court's evidence, which we hold and trust, should the court choose to accept it." As for my personal hopes for each of you as criminalists, may all your days be filled with childlike excitement for what lies before you. That's how mine have been. So now you needn't ponder, Luke, we get the clear impression that you've been a criminalist all your life. Is this true? You should now know the answer, and it is, not yet. Thank you. Thank you, John.